Have you ever actually stopped to wonder what is really happening inside your body when you pick up a heavy weight? Like, sure, we all know about muscle fibers tearing and rebuilding, but what if I told you the most dramatic transformations aren't actually happening in your biceps? They're happening in your brain and your hormones. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into this completely fascinating intersection of psychology and biology to break down the true mind-muscle equilibrium.
So think about this. Does lifting weights actually change your personality? It's a pretty profound question, isn't it? For decades, we've basically treated the gym as this place for purely physical, aesthetic improvement. But today, we're looking at some hard data that asks a different question. Does physical training create internal psychological changes or just external muscles? Put simply, are you building your character or are you just building your calves? Here's our roadmap for today's explainer. First, we'll look at building muscles and building the self. Then, the psychological impact of bodybuilding. Third, we'll get into cortisol, the stress hormone and exercise. Fourth, identifying exactly when cortisol rises. And finally, number 5, finding the balance between sports and hormones. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. Building muscles and building the self.
All right, so we're going to look specifically at how this dynamic plays out during one of the most, psychologically vulnerable periods of human life, high school. To really ground our exploration today, we are looking at this brilliant 2022 academic study published in the Sports System Journal by researcher Gergour Mohamed. This Algerian study took a super rigorous, statistical approach to figure out exactly how physical exercise, specifically bodybuilding, affects the self-image of teenage students. And it's incredibly illuminating because it takes something completely subjective, like confidence, and measures it objectively. Now, this study operates on a really foundational psychological principle, the idea that self-concept isn't just some fleeting feeling you have. It's a highly organized cognitive structure. Literally, it's the lens through which a teenager views their own worth, and that directly shapes their everyday behavior. And as the research shows, bringing bodybuilding into a teenager's routine radically alters this self-concept across their physical, personal, and social dimensions. It's like a total reset.
Section 2. The psychological impact of bodybuilding.
Okay, let's actually dive into the numbers here, because this is where it gets wild. There is a massive, and I mean massive gap in physical self-esteem between the two groups of teenagers they looked at. On the one hand, we've got the bodybuilders scoring an average of 65.79 on the physical self-concept scale. But on the other side, the non-practitioners are sitting way down at 42.68. I mean, that's not just a minor bump in confidence, right? That is a fundamental shift in how these young adults perceive their own physical existence in the world. But how do these numbers actually translate into real life? Well, the study breaks it down beautifully. It turns out the teenagers who were practicing bodybuilding were found to be significantly more optimistic. They were more confident, and they were way more comfortable seeking peer attention. In stark contrast, the non-practitioners lean towards being much more pessimistic, dependent, and, this is key, highly anxious about social rejection. So this physical training is quite literally rewiring them from anxious teenagers into confident young adults. Talk about a total game changer.
In fact, the researcher summarizes it with this really powerful conclusion. They state, statistical data showed statistically significant differences between practicing and non-bodybuilding pupils for the benefit of practitioners. Basically, it's undeniable. Hard proof that hitting the gym has a profound and genuinely positive effect on a teenager's psychological and social perception.
Which brings us to Section 3, cortisol, the stress hormone, and exercise.
But okay, here's where we hit a major medical plot twist. Despite all these amazing psychological benefits we just talked about, we have to look at what is happening to the endocrine system. To really understand this, we need to define our terms for a second. Cortisol. It's a hormone secreted by your adrenal gland in response to stress. You can just think of it as your body's built-in natural alarm system. Whether you are running from a literal bear, stressing out of our math test, or deadlifting heavy weights, your body registers all of that as stress, and it pumps out cortisol in response.
And this perfectly illustrates the core conflict of our whole explainer today. The intersection of mental health and physical biology is, it's really complex. Working out demands massive amounts of energy. And to cope with that extreme physical exertion, your adrenal gland naturally spikes your cortisol levels. So you end up in this weird paradox where your mind is getting super confident and happy, but your body is technically in a state of high alarm.
Let's move to Section 4. When does cortisol rise?
So, if exercise is generally good, but cortisol is a stress hormone, we really need to know exactly when and why cortisol rises to potentially toxic levels while working out.
The medical literature draws a very clear line here. High cortisol triggers include things like intense weightlifting, running, and crucially, any workout session lasting over an hour. On the flip side, low cortisol activities include yoga, breathing exercises, and light aerobics, which actually help lower the hormone. The data is clear on this. High-intensity training, or simply staying in the gym for longer than 60 minutes, flips a biological switch and turns your workout into a major cortisol trigger. And here is exactly why you absolutely must care about this. If you push your body way too hard and keep your cortisol chronically high, you risk developing symptoms aligned with Cushing syndrome. We're talking high blood pressure, sadness, nervousness, and, ironically enough, muscle weakness. That's right, if you overtrain, this stress hormone will literally cause mood swings and eat away at the very muscles and confidence you were trying to build in the first place. Honestly, it defeats the whole purpose.
But hold on, don't think zero cortisol is the goal either. Having too little of this hormone leads to a condition called Addison's disease, which is marked by severe fatigue, dizziness, and dangerously low blood pressure. So it is entirely about finding a Goldilocks zone. Not too much stress, not too little stress, but just the exact right amount to trigger growth without causing your body to break down.
Finally, Section 5, the balance between sports and hormones.
So how do we actually take all this data, the amazing psychological benefits and the hormonal risks, and create a routine that maximizes our confidence while minimizing toxic stress? Well, here's some highly practical, evidence-based takeaways you can literally apply today. Step 1. Try to work out in the morning. Cortisol naturally drops in the evening to prep you for sleep, so an intense night workout totally disrupts that natural rhythm. Step 2. Take actual rest periods during intense sessions to let your nervous system recover. And Step 3. This is the golden rule. Keep your intense workouts under an hour to avoid that massive cortisol dump.
Now, the crucial point here is how you fuel this balance with your pre- and post-workout strategy. Before you hit the gym, eat carbohydrates. This gives your body the immediate energy it needs, which actually prevents an early stress response. But after the gym, you absolutely must eat protein. Why? Because post-workout protein physically stops the elevated cortisol from acting catabolically. In plain English, it stops the stress hormone from eating away at your hard-earned muscle fibers. You can also further support this really delicate balance with a few simple dietary additions. Eating fiber-rich foods and getting some prebiotics in your system heavily supports gut health, which is directly tied to regulating the body's hormones and managing stress. Combine that with high-quality restorative sleep, and you are giving your body the absolute best environment to flush out stress and lock in those mental and physical gains we all want.
All of this leaves us with a pretty provocative final question. Are you training your body at the expense of your hormones? It is so easy to just chase the physical confidence and the aesthetic changes, but true health really requires a deeper awareness of what's going on under the hood. So I challenge you to look at your own routine today. Are you actually finding that perfect mind-muscle equilibrium? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.